Happy Friday, readers. Today is the day that you guys get to write your teacher a letter. So whether you're writing to me or you're writing to Miss Smith, either way, you're going to write us a letter about the book that you are reading. Every Friday, we're going to do this. So just be prepared that Fridays are the days that you write us a letter about your story. Now, I really want us to pay attention to how to write the letter, okay? So let's start with the beginning. How do you start a letter? I want you to think about that. When you're writing to somebody, how do you start it? Well, you first have to tell who you're writing to. So you usually start with something, the heading. That's what it's called, the heading. But you write dear and then the name of the person. So dear, and you either are going to write dear Miss Smith, or you're going to write Dear Miss Davis, Mrs. Davis. So if you have me as a teacher, you're going to write Mrs. Davis. If you have Miss Smith, you're going to write Miss Smith. Okay, so you address your who are you writing the story to? This is called the heading. We have to make sure we have our heading. Okay? Then after we have our heading, we have to make sure that we say what book we read. So I read the book. I do give a little space here. I don't start right here. I give a little bit of a space. I read the book. And then you tell me the book that you read. So I read the book Chameleons Are Cool. I'm going to use this book for today's. Chameleons are cool. Period. Okay. So I started off with my header. I told who am I writing this story to? Dear Miss Smith. Or who am I writing my letter to? I'm so sorry, my words. So dear Miss Smith, comma, I read the book Chameleons Are Cool. Okay, those are the first two things you need to have. You might want to do that right now. If you want, you can pause the video and write that down on a notebook. Dear, your teacher's name. I read the book. Then you're going to put in the name of the book that you read today in there. Next step is you get to choose. What are you going to tell me about your story? You have options. Let me show you. We went over a while ago during reading. Remember we practiced making predictions with the book Enemy Pie? You had to stop and think, oh, what do I think is going to happen next? Well, you can do that with the story that you read today. Maybe there's a point in the story where you make a prediction. You're like, oh, I think I know what's going to happen next. Or maybe it's wherever you stop. Like, let's say you didn't finish reading the book today and you want to tell me what you think is going to happen next. Go for it. So the next part you could say is, so after you said, I read the book, blah, 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 you can say, I think blank will happen next. You can tell me what you think is going to happen next. You can also make a connection, remember? It reminds me of, and it could remind you of yourself. It could remind you of another book, something that's happened in the world. But you can make that kind of connection as you're reading your book. And you can tell me about that connection. So I read the book, Chameleons Are Cool. It reminded me of my chameleon that I have at home. Maybe you have a chameleon as a pet. Another connection that you can make is like, I used to think that chameleons changed colors because of their environment, but now I know they don't, right? That's a connection because you used to think the same thing that it said in the book. You can ask a question. So maybe you want to know something like why, like what kind of, why do chameleons not eat fruit? Is it bad for them? Because that's something that was in the story. It said they do not eat fruit. Remember, they eat like flies and sometimes they would even eat like small birds, depending on the size of the chameleon. So you can ask a question about your story. Or you can tell me about what your story was about. And remember, we practice doing summaries, which is what the story is about, by using the strategy somebody wanted but so. So who is the character? What did they want? But what's that big problem that happens? And so how did they solve that problem in the story? Okay. But if you're reading a nonfiction book, because remember, I read the book Chameleons Are Cool. That's the book I read. That's not a fiction book. That means this book is telling us real life stuff, real facts. So it's nonfiction. There aren't characters. There's not a problem. There's not a solution. So I can't write a summary using somebody wanted but so. So instead, I can just say what I learned. So I can tell Mrs. Davis or Miss Smith one thing that I learned about the book, okay? And you can still tell them what is it about. So the book is about chameleons. I learned blah, 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 blah. Okay? So I'm going to do that one just to show you guys if you end up reading a nonfiction book, how can you still write a letter using the summary? So you want to tell about the story. So again, dear Miss Smith, I read the book Chameleons Are Cool. Got my first two things. My header, who is this letter to? What book did I read? Next up is telling my own thoughts. I get to pick one of those. I chose to do a summary, and since it's nonfiction, I'm just going to tell what this story was about and what's something I learned. So I can write, the book is about chameleons. I learned that chameleons, and you have to think, what did you learn in your story? I learned that chameleons change colors when they're mad at each other. So I learned that chameleons change colors when they are mad. And that's not the only thing. So I'm going to look back in my book because that's what good readers do too. Sometimes we forget. So sometimes you're going to have to go back in your story and remind yourself, what did it say? I don't remember. So here's the page where it talked about them changing colors. It says they change colors when they're angry, which also means mad, so that's fine, or when they're too cold, too hot, or when they're sick. So angry, when they're mad, cold, hot, or sick. So see how I went back in my story to help me remember? That's perfectly fine to do that. Okay, so I've told who am I writing the story to? I said what book I'm reading. I read the book Chameleons Are Cool. Then I told what I was thinking or what I learned. So the book is about chameleons. I learned that chameleons change colors when they are mad, cold, hot, or sick. Got my three parts to my letter. My very last part to the letter is going to be the closing, which is when you tell who is writing this letter to the teacher. So you can either write from, another word you can write is sincerely, or love. Some people put love, but I'm going to use the word from. Okay, so from, comma, and then underneath it you write your name. From Mrs. Davis. Okay, so top, dear teacher, I read the book. Tell me the book you read, and tell me something that you were thinking as you're reading, and then at the end I should see from and your name. So from so-and-so, from Imaya, from Jaden, from whoever, okay? Whatever your name is, you're going to put down here. All right, guys, now it is your turn. You're going to read for 20 minutes in your books. Pick one book or the only book that you read, and you're going to write a letter to your teacher about the book you read during your independent reading time. So when you were reading by yourself, that is the book you're going to tell me about. So write, dear, my name, I read the book, tell me the book you read about, and then you get to choose. Are you going to tell me a prediction? Are you going to give me a connection you had, a question you had, or are you going to tell me what the story was about? Okay? And then don't forget the closing from and your name. You guys got it? I can't wait to read your letters, and I will be writing back to you. Me and Ms. Smith will be reading to see what are you telling us about your stories.